Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Rapidas here on behalf of the marketing team at School Health. I'd like to thank you for joining us today and participating in our School Sports Safety, How to Protect Athletes from Sudden Cardiac Arrest webinar. Joining us today from Who We Play For is Evan Ernst and physician assistant Shawn Sima. Both presenters have had a close friend or family member impacted by sudden cardiac arrest. We appreciate both of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us, and we would also like to thank everyone who has joined today as well. Before I turn the time over to Evan and Shawn, I would like to review a few quick things about today's webinar. We will be giving away a Zoll AED3 at the end of today's presentation. All attendees will be entered and one winner will be randomly selected. Stay tuned to see if you've won. We will not be taking audio questions, but you can submit your questions via the questions interface tab in GoToWebinar. You can submit your questions anytime during the presentation. Evan and Shawn will present for about 45 minutes, after which we will take questions in the order that they were received. This webinar will be recorded and a link to it will be posted on the schoolhealth.com website, and we will email the link to you for future playback. Everyone who attends today's webinar will also be receiving a certificate of attendance for joining us. You should expect a link to the webinar in that email as well. If you are having technical difficulties with the audio or visual portion of today's webinar, please call GoToWebinar directly at 855-352-9003. That number once again is 855-352-9003. With that being said, let's turn the time over to Evan and Shawn.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thank you, School Health, for having me and Shawn join and talk a little bit about the Who We Play For story, our mission, the Damar Effect, and how it's changed the velocity legislation for a bill that we started many years ago that very few people on earth seem to care about, to now everybody and their brother has joined the party, which we love. Also, the importance of heart screenings, we're going to touch on a lot in this talk for both youth athletes and really all kids. And of course, having an emergency action plan and an AED. You hit that next slide, Shawn. All right, while Shawn figures out the slide, all right, here we go. So we're with this little nonprofit called Who We Play For that's been swinging the hammer for over a decade. It was started by a bunch of best friends who in a small town grew up with the same group of kids since we were in the second and third grade, went to the same schools, had the same cattle call, sports physical, had the same pediatrician, played on the same teams. And our obsession in our puppy days was soccer, and our hope and our dream was one day to be the Remember the Titans story and bring our little school a high school state championship. And one day we took the field a day after our best friend and teammate had a game-winning goal against a longtime rival, and we watched him collapse on the soccer field in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and die in our teammates' arms of sudden cardiac arrest. There's a picture on my left is Rafe after he scored that last goal the day before in the final seconds. And then the picture on the right is me, number 20, sometime during or before puberty, and Rafe and one of our co-founders, Kieran. And when Rafe went down at Cocoa Beach High School, none of us knew what an AED was. One of us knew how to do CPR. His name was Clinton. He was required to learn CPR through ROTC, and he started it on Rafe. Two of our other best friends and co-founders ran through the high school looking for the AED, which was locked up in the front office, and they were unable to get to it. And then two of our other buddies ran to EMS, which got stuck in the mud a half mile or maybe a mile away, and helped run the AED to Rafe. And at that point, when we got the AED to Rafe, 10 or so minutes had gone by, and as you learn from Shawn, if you don't respond to sudden cardiac arrest in the first 4 minutes or so, the likelihood of survival is incredibly small. So for Rafe, his heart condition was hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, HCM for short, a condition that's detectable 95% of the time on an ECG, compared to around 4% or less with the standard sports physical and annual wellness physical. And Rafe, like 80% of student athletes, his first symptom was sudden cardiac arrest. So the perfect picture of health until he was collapsing on his back and his teammates' arms. No one on this earth could look at this kid and guess that he was a ticking time bomb. So a week went by, and Shawn, you can hit the next slide. A bunch of best friends came back to the soccer field, and with his family in this picture, buried his ashes in this soccer field. You can see his name in lights on our first game back in the puppy days, and his family who stood on the sidelines to start the game in a moment of silence. Rafe's dad is the chairman of our board and who we play for, and the inspiration and the lighthouse for all of us, with his mom, of course, Miss Macron. And now 10 years later, this little nonprofit that's refused to give up has become the largest heart screening nonprofit in the United States. We brought heart screenings to 500 plus schools across the country, from the biggest collegiate programs to professional programs to the most vulnerable middle schools our country has to offer. And we've done it in a few other countries as well. Of course, our focus is the United States, with the occasional medical trip, global medical trip. Over those 250,000 heart screenings, who we play for has documented around 250 kids who've been saved. 3 of those kids who got to be on Good Morning America a few months ago with Michael Strahan. One of those kids who had HCM, who never had a symptom, who was just like our teammate Rafe, who had her heart screened because Orange County, Orlando, Florida made heart screenings required, is the 9th largest, biggest school district in the United States. This girl named Haley, who's one of our champions, had her first symptom, and it was sudden cardiac arrest at Windermere High School in Central Florida. And if it wasn't for the defibrillator that was implanted in her chest, because she knew she had HCM, because she had her heart screened, who knows what would have happened. But in Haley's case, when she had her cardiac arrest, she stood right back up. The defibrillator shocked her heart back to life. And so Haley, for a couple hours, didn't even know she died of cardiac arrest at school that day. And it wasn't until her cardiologist in the morning called her to check in and see what's going on. But what is a heart screening? In this picture, you'll see what it looks like. It's a 12-lead ECG or EKG. They're interchangeable terms. It takes about 5 minutes per kid. It takes the sports physical or annual youth wellness checkup from about 1 to 4% effective to around 80 to 95% effective for the heart conditions that cause sudden cardiac death. The false positive rate, thanks to many people on who we play for's medical board who've committed their lives to this cause, and their research and their criteria, called the international criteria, has been driven down to around 1%, 1 to 3%. The cost for who we play for, when we were college kids dreaming this up, wanting to try and represent what Rafe represents, every kid in the United States who never had the opportunity, we realized that the biggest reason why this is not a standard of care in America and is a standard of care in other countries, like in Italy, where every student has had an ECG, student athlete, since 1982, and reduced sudden cardiac death over 40 years by 90%. In our country, ECGs are expensive, 100 to 150 bucks, and our program worked to figure out a way to deliver it more affordably by leveraging a bunch of genius volunteer pediatric cardiologists who give their time to make this possible. It costs us $20 per kid, and we do it for free for any kid who can't afford it. We partner with a lot of hospitals, groups like NASCAR, and many more to help make sure that anyone who can't afford the 20 bucks to be screened will always be free. So before I give it to Shawn, what's most exciting for me here, as we get a couple thousand people to tune in from across the United States, is that this can be a standard of care in America. It is possible. In the words of Dr. Antonio Policia, the Italian cardiologist who made this a standard of care in the 80s with the support of many more, the one difference in American healthcare and in Italian healthcare is that in Italy, they don't put a value on the life of the child. This is a program that's celebrated across the country. And in our country, at the top of the medical ivory tower, we've debated this for 50 years. The result has been a 0% reduction of sudden cardiac death in student athletes and in kids. And you look at that again, zoom back out at Italy, who has around a 90% reduction over 40 years. So it can be done and it will be done, and we'll be relentless until the job is done, and we hope to do it with everybody on this call. So thank you, School Health, Alex, and the rest of the crew.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. I personally want to thank School Health, Zoll, and all of you for having our organization on here and for taking time out of your busy day. My name is Shawn Sima. I'm the Impact Director with Who We Play For. As you heard earlier, I'm a PA. I've been a PA for 24 years. As you can see, retired military, joined the military, really with not much else, anywhere else to go. Joined the military with a bag of clothes and a hope that I could get some education and get a skill where I could go back out and support a family one day. And I got so much more. The military sent me to PA school. They sent me for my orthopedic fellowship. I did 20 years, and my family was living the American dream. As you can see, I have a beautiful family. My daughter Lexi and my son Carter, they traveled with me all throughout the country on this 20-year journey in the military. And we were living the American dream. I mean, compared to where I grew up to where, we were at just a few years ago, it didn't even seem real. I now work at the Veterans Hospital here in Orlando, Florida. And over and over and over, I'm told, thank you for your service. And in my mind, I think every single time I really need to thank, the United States and Uncle Sam for its service to me, because I literally went in with no place to go and a bag of clothes. And I came out with something that, I tell my wife all the time, as long as I have a pulse and I'm breathing, we're gonna be taken care of. And the schooling and everything, I just, I can't, thank them enough. But this is my family. They're everything to me. We'll move on to the next screen here. This is my daughter, Lexi. There's nothing like a daddy's girl. There's nothing like a mama's boy either, but there's definitely a special relationship that dads have with their daughters. And she was my everything. She hung the moon, she hung the stars. She did it for me. I used to tell her brother, I still tell him to this day, like, I love you, but your daughter, my sister, or your sister is number one in my eyes. And that's why he's in counseling right now. But, we had it all. And both of my kids were excellent athletes. They played every single sport. They were both really, really active kids. And we wanted them to channel that energy. Just like everybody on this call, probably, I was super overprotective of my daughter and my son. I made sure that they had the best of everything when it came to safety equipment. They were not allowed to chew on bottle caps, none of that stuff that we all, are aware could be harmful for them. Flash forward to February 2nd, 2016. My daughter, who was a great softball player, left a high school game and was supposed to meet us at a benefit for my son. At the last minute, she decided she was going to stop off and go to the local gym. She had cheerleading tryouts the next day, and she wanted to get ready for the 1.5-mile run. And as the good Lord would have it, my daughter ran almost every single night outside. But on this particular night, because she was going to meet us, she decided to stop off at the gym. And a good friend of mine at the gym this particular night started blowing up my phone at the exact time that the lacrosse coach was giving his speech. And I kept ignoring him. And then finally, I get this message. And I say it all the time. If you're a parent or you're someone that loves some other person in this world, and you get this message, it's life-changing. It's scary. And I panicked. I threw everything down in this restaurant. I ran out the door and took off for the gym, which was very close by. And I had no idea what I was going to find, but this is what was going on. My daughter had collapsed 30 seconds into her run. She wasn't running fast. She had just started, and without warning, she suffered sudden cardiac arrest, and she was thrown off the treadmill. And actually, the treadmill that she was on is the one that's in the front of that picture, just in front of that leg with the black shoe on. So that's how far she was thrown. And if you look at the picture of on the right, That is not a picture from a CPR magazine or a CPR booklet. It looks standard because Jack Rhodes, who was a non-medical guy, was forced to take CPR by his job. The AED that's laying in front of her actually had just had its battery and pads changed out 3 weeks before this happened. It took 15 minutes for the ambulance to get there to my daughter in the middle of middle-class America. And without these folks, and you'll see their picture, my story would be the same as Rafe's. My daughter was put on a helicopter and she was flown to the same hospital that Evan's best friend died in. But because these folks were there and they knew what to do, my story is a happy ending. When I got to the hospital, I met Lexi's cardiologist, and he told me, and you see the ending is here. I don't want to leave y'all hanging, but the ending is here. He told me, if your daughter survives, we're going to put her on ice for 3 days. And if she wakes up, she's got to get a defibrillator put in her chest. And I asked him, I have no idea what you're talking about. He had no idea that I was a 24-year medical provider. And he said, Mr. Sima, you have no idea what just happened to you. Your daughter just survived the unsurvivable. And if she walks out of here, she's never going to get this chance again. At the time, the number was 7%. So 7 out of 100 survived what my daughter survived. And I tell everybody, you know, as a father, you'll run into a burning building, you'll jump into a lake full of alligators, you'll do anything to save your child. But at this point, you're helpless. You're depending on doctors and most of all, God. And we prayed to God that we would get a chance with our daughter, and that if he would answer, and we're making deals with God, he needs no deal I have. But we said, hey, if our daughter makes it, we don't even know what's going on, but we'll do something to pay it forward. And that's the reason I'm on this call right now today. And that's the reason we will not stop until every family has a chance to have their own Lexi Sima story. So this is a great summation of what happened to me. What you should know, again, I'm a 24-year PA. I've done thousands of school physicals in my 24-year career. I've had hundreds of thousands patient interactions. And until this happened to my daughter, until I sat for 3 days reading on my iPhone about sudden cardiac arrest, I had no idea. I'm old enough to remember the old Hank Gather story from the early 90s. He was a very famous college basketball player who died right in front of all of our eyes. And just like we saw just a few weeks ago with LeBron James' son, every newscast opened up with, this is rare. This doesn't happen all of that often. But I'm here to tell you something a little bit different. The first thing that I didn't truly understand, and I did really well on my boards, I thought I paid really good attention, but I didn't truly understand the difference between sudden cardiac arrest and a heart attack. A heart attack is a clogged artery problem. It's a plumbing problem. You have a blocked artery. Typically with those, you get chest pain, shortness of breath, a little bit of upset stomach, jaw pain, sweats. We all know those symptoms. Sudden cardiac arrest is an electrical problem. And that's what most of our kids have, is an electrical problem. It usually strikes suddenly, and it strikes without warning, and it strikes the healthiest of the healthiest or the sickest of the sickest. Nobody is immune. My daughter was an elite athlete that never complained of one problem, but yet we found her on February 2nd lying on the ground fighting for her life. So we're going to go into a video here. It's about 1 minute, but one thing I want you to pay attention to is at the end, because this is what needs to happen in every single one of your schools. It's almost like a NASCAR. If you ever watch NASCAR, how the pit crew shows up to change those tires and fill up the gas. I want you to watch the last part of this video, and I really want you to keep that in mind. as you watch. And I'll go ahead and start the video.
Hi everyone, I'm John Dresner, Director of the UW Medicine Center for Sports Cardiology, and in the next 100 seconds I want to show you how to recognize sudden cardiac arrest in an athlete.
He can be seen coming out of a timeout huddle, his head dropping. He stumbles, then alarmingly he falls face first.
Here you see Keontae head drop, stumble, sudden collapse. This is what sudden cardiac arrest in an athlete looks like.
And collapses, just like Hamlin did, in sports from football to lacrosse to baseball.
In Mark Vivian Foe, he shows all the signs of sudden cardiac arrest: continued breathing after collapse, eyes open and rolled back, the face of sudden cardiac arrest. For Damar, after his arrest, his arms go up with seizure-like activity. And for Christian Erickson, a sudden collapse, also unresponsive, eyes open, brief seizure activity in his leg. This is sudden cardiac arrest.
We've been there, but that's not a good look at all.
With Claire, a dramatic episode, collapse with seizure-like activity in the arms, an amazing emergency response. Call for help, someone go get the AED. Remember, in a collapsed athlete that is unresponsive to verbal stimuli and a shoulder tap, you must assume it's sudden cardiac arrest. Call for help, start chest compressions, get the AED. Anyone can save a life.
Pretty amazing. Actually, let me make sure. Pretty amazing response. You get to see it. That's what it looks like. You have to definitely update yourself on signs and symptoms of sudden cardiac arrest. The other thing that I found, which I had no idea, because there's no commercial, there's nothing that I've ever found in the media but one commercial by University of Phoenix that has anything to do with sudden cardiac arrest. I did not know, as a medical provider, that this is the leading cause of death basically everywhere. Fill in the blank. The leading cause of death on our school campuses of all ages, of our athletes, workplace. I mean, you can read it just as good as I can. This is the leading cause of death in America. It's the only thing that's come close in the last few years is COVID. 1,000 people a day have sudden cardiac arrest in our country. 1,000. Right now, the average survival rate is 10%. With just simple bystander CPR, that number can go to 30%. And if you can do CPR and get an AED on them within 3 to 5 minutes, that's 50%. Do the math. 100 people survive right now. With a simple skill taught in 15 minutes, compression-only CPR, that number is 300. You put one of those AEDs on somebody really quick, the average survival is 50% or 500 lives a day. You are talking to a guy who knows the value of one life. Again, leading cause of death on school campus of all ages. It's the leading cause of death of our athletes, and 1 in every 300 kids has a problem. And at least 7,000 kids die every single year. There's a whole other topic on that we can discuss maybe next year, but this is the number that we're going with because this is what's put out by the American Heart. The number is probably even higher than this. It's the leading cause of death in sports. 75% of all deaths are related to cardiac disease in an athlete. So let's stop here for a second. So, Shawn, you're on here. You're bragging about your 24-year career and all the physicals that you've done and patient encounters and interactions. These kids passed their physical. How can you sit here and show us that number? Why is this such a problem? Why are we learning so much about this right now in our country? Well, the fact of the matter is most of the things that are going to kill our kids are missed on the regular physical exam. Yes, I do orthopedics and sports medicine. I worry about your shoulders and your knees and your necks, but what I really about is what's going to kill you. And what we're doing now is not enough. We can't hear electricity going through a wall with a stethoscope, and I can't hear it going through your heart. And I know we can hear an irregular heartbeat, a fast heartbeat, a slow heartbeat. If we're lucky and we do every single maneuver that there is, there's a 75 to 80% chance that we're still going to miss the most deadly heart condition there is for a young patient under the age of 30. Just like Rafe and just like a few other people I'm going to show you, we miss that. So what is a heart screening, right? It sounds fancy, but just like you can't figure out what's wrong with the plug in the wall without a meter, you can't figure out a lot of these electrical problems which affect our kids and put them at risk for sudden death without using an EKG. It's an EKG. It's read by a cardiologist who knows a specific criteria called the international criteria, and it's much, much, much better than what our current standard is. Let's go into that a little bit. I want to show you this because I will tell you, I'm a medical provider. There's a lot of you who are as well, and I keep saying that over and over, not as like we're you know on the ivory tower. It's a little bit. I'm not embarrassed, but I know it's up to me and all of us to sort of raise awareness. So this is a study that just hasn't even really been released yet, but this is out of the military academies. In 2002, the military took the EKG out of the enlistment physical. Since that time, I'll give you one guess on what the leading cause of non-traumatic death in the military is. It's why we're here today. It's sudden cardiac arrest. Yes, suicides and accidents are still number one, but when it comes to everything else, it's sudden cardiac arrest. So they did this pilot program starting with the US Navy, and now it's spread to all the freshman classes of West Point, Air Force Academy, Coast Guard Academy. So they screened 7,600 kids, and of those 7,600 kids, 26 of them were diagnosed with deadly heart conditions. So to do the math for you, remember I said 1 in 300. Well, that number was 1 in 293. But really what stood out to me as a provider is where I have this big arrow. So the standard AHA, American Heart Recommended Approach with physical exam performed worse than the ECG. And despite being performed by a board certified cardiologist, they did not find one of these problems with their stethoscope. 26 kids passed their physical given by, but yet had deadly heart conditions. Cardiologist, #1 killer of athletes in college. This is from 2016. We had it again in the news recently with LeBron James. It hasn't changed. It's still the leading cause of death in athletes in college. But what happens when you go to college? If you go to a big school, they're not going to accept the stethoscope exam. You're getting an EKG. Some you're even getting an echo, which we know is an ultrasound of the heart to look at the size of the heart. But you are getting an EKG. And as I like to say, do you think that you walk across the stage, you take your diploma, you shake the principal's hand, and that's when you develop these heart conditions? No, they're there, but we're taking a chance. This is a picture here that's heartbreaking. You have 4 athletes here. The 2 on the right played Division I sports. They both were screened. They were both to be found with the most deadly heart condition that there is. And yes, their career is over. They cannot play sports anymore. The 2 on the left, they didn't live long enough to make it to college, to have a chance to get a scholarship to one of these big schools. All 4 of these kids had the exact same condition. The 2 on the left are from my county. They're 2 of at least 20 that we know about, but they're dead because they didn't live long enough to make it to college and get a Division I scholarship. What about when you make it to the pros? Are they going to accept the stethoscope exam? No. Every single one of these, they're getting an EKG. If you go to college, college, right? If you go to jail in most states in America, you're getting an EKG. But our kids, this is our Florida pre-participation physical. They get a head to toe physical. You know, the doctor or the PA or the chiropractor uses or the nurse practitioner uses their stethoscope. They've updated the questionnaire last year. The American Academy of Pediatrics updated their questionnaire to ask specific questions, right? Because we want to catch these kids. Do you get chest pain, shortness of breath? Have you passed out? Has anyone in your family died young? Does anyone under age 50 have a defibrillator in their chest? But look at this. 80% of the athletes who've died in this study, when they went back and looked at their physical form, sudden cardiac arrest, sudden death was their first symptom. Lexi Sima, my daughter, never complained. Rafe Macaron never complained. Over the 250 kids that we found on heart screenings, most of them thought it was normal for your chest to flutter or for you to have a little bit of chest pain when you're exercising, because that's normal for them. And this is just a study, again, adding an ECG or an EKG, we know they're both the same thing. It's 6 times more effective to catch conditions associated with sudden death. 6 times. Would you put your kid on an airplane if you saw the guy out the window was checking it with, you know, something that was 6 times less effective than what the other airline is using? 6 times more effective. And we do these screens, we do them in Florida, we do them all over. I'll pause here for 10 seconds. If you want to screenshot that QR code, we can help you bring EKGs to your town, no matter where you're at. We either have a partner or we have somebody who can help us get to you to screen either your schools or your kids or whatever you want to do. We're going to transition now into cardiac emergency response plans. We know the Damar Effect. Damar Hamlin on live TV has probably helped save more lives in the United States than any other person associated with sudden cardiac arrest. It happened live and it happened on film, and all of us were horrified. Many of the families that I'm associated with, we weren't shocked. You know, he got hit in the chest. He had something that would not have been found on an EKG, but he got hit in the chest. His heart was stunned and he was dead. He was not living. He had no heartbeat. He had no brain function at this time, and his lungs were not moving. He was dead. But unlike most of the world, he had at least 30 people, medical professionals in that stadium that night that responded to him. And he's here today, and he just took the field a couple weeks ago. This is what I need all of you to understand. We have nurses, we have athletic trainers, we have medical professionals, we have administrators. It doesn't take a doctor to save a life. It takes action. It takes a plan. It takes being ready. It takes expecting the worst. 3 non-medical people saved my daughter's life at a gym at 8 o'clock at night on a Tuesday in 2016. And that's the power that we all have as medical providers and people who are seeing this today. We need to bring this back to where we came from and help our administrators and our nurses and our school boards and our superintendents understand the danger that lurks in our hallways, that we have to be ready. I hope it never happens. But I will tell you, I'm going to just review 3 stars here real quick. The studies show, and if they ask you for this reference, text me, email me, I'll send it to you. 1 in 25 schools in the United States is going to have somebody drop dead on their campus. It might be a kid. It's more than likely going to be a teacher or coach or grandma who was there to see the school play. But it's coming. There's supposed to be 3,000 people on this talk right now. So it's coming to you. If it hasn't come already, it's coming. And that's not scare tactics. It's just statistics. Are you going to be ready? The survival rate, if a school has an AED and an emergency response plan, is 70%. If you don't have an AED and you're not ready, that number is 8%. And I'm going to show you something a little bit later, because all of us are thinking, well, doesn't every school have an AED? Isn't there a law in every state to require a school to have an AED? The answer is no. I'm going to skip this. This is a paragraph again. If anyone calls you on any of the information and wants to see the reference, here it is. But what I want you to really see is 71% survival on school campus if you have an AED and a plan. If you slide over to the right, it's an 89% survival for a student athlete. If you can get an AED on them within 3 minutes, 89%. Right now, it's 10%. So 9 out of 10 die. If your school is ready and you're practicing and you have the right equipment, that number goes to 9 out of 10 walk out of the hospital like Lexi Sima. What is an emergency response plan? It's basically a fire drill for a medical response. It may not just be a heart. We see a lot, and many of you in these schools are seeing, drug overdoses, accidental overdoses with fentanyl. You have to respond to that. And if you don't have a team that's ready, then you're probably going to not have the proper response. So an emergency response is a fire drill for the heart. You have a group of people, it's typically 5 people. It may be the nurse, the principal, the athletic director, a football coach, an athletic trainer who make up this team. You don't have to shut the whole school down. You want to have an AED. In the perfect world, you would have an AED 1.5 minutes for everywhere, because if you can get the AED on somebody in 3 minutes, it's 90%. So 1.5 minute brisk walk there, 1.5 brisk walk back, 3 minutes. You want to conduct at least 2 drills a year, just like you do a fire drill. We do 1 a month in Florida. It's mandated. We do 0 for cardiac emergency response plans. And you want to bring in the fire department, the local police. This needs to be a group effort, because they need to know how to get into school. If the kid goes down on the football field, they need to know the entry points. This all has to be a dance, not chaos. Is your AED ready? That's part of an emergency response plan. You have to check these AEDs. They're not Picassos. They're not $1,000, $2,000 machines that you hang on the wall for decoration. You have to monitor them. You have to check them. These 3 AEDs are from schools in Florida. They're expired. What good is an AED if you're like Rafe Macarone's tragedy? On the left here, the AED is inside. I can tell you that off to your right is 500 kids at a lacrosse tournament, and the AED is locked up because there was no snack bar. Again, does this truly happen? I mean, I live in such and such state where we're on top of this. How does this happen? But here's 3 national stories. Miami-Dade, a few years ago, had expired defibrillators in their schools. Emergency action plan in Missouri, you wait 26 minutes, you have a kid dying on the ground. In Connecticut, we think the kid's playing around, he's playing a joke. Literally, he's lying there dying. This happens. And we'll go into this really quick, but this is really, if you're not paying attention, I really need you to pay attention, because I will tell you, I grew up on the east side of Jacksonville, Florida, a very low income area, a high rate of African American, Hispanics, and minorities. Is there a group that's more susceptible to dying from sudden cardiac arrest? And that answer is yes. This can't be argued. This can't be denied, depending on what side of the fence you're on. This is This is hardcore data here. An African American is much more likely to die than a white person. Here's just some headlines. A black kid's 41% less likely to get CPR. Latino, less likely to get CPR. Your race, your wealth, and your zip code a lot of times will decide if you live or die. My daughter, who I now live in middle class America, had an engineer save her life. If she grew up in 32202, where I grew up, chances are this is a different story. And this has been going on for years. I've gone back, and this is another talk for another time, but I've gone back on the internet and found the same headline every year from 1993 to 2023. We need to step up. We are the medical professionals and the people of this world who can make a difference. You're hearing the story right now. I'm giving you the facts, and the headlines and the numbers are not changing. And that is why we need to be leaders on the front line spreading this message. We need to be spreading. There's a lot of stuff going on in our country, but there's things like this that we can make a difference for. What about a woman? Believe it or not, let me just pull these through. A woman, your daughter, my daughter, your mom, your wife is less likely to get CPR in real America. I will tell you, one of the gentlemen who responded to my daughter, as you see her laying there, when we took that picture for the newspaper where they're all standing, he came and apologized to me for exposing my daughter's breast to the gym. And he was saving her life. But that is the crazy world we live in. We're protected. You can be sued for anything in the United States, but we're protected by Good Samaritan laws. A woman deserves a chance to live just like a male does. And it's something like 27% of women are less likely to get CPR than a man. I say this, there's a lot of stuff in this little picture here, but I will tell you, expose their breasts, do whatever it takes to save their life. I always say, part the Red Sea and put your hands in the middle of that chest. And if you break their ribs or you do anything that may injure him, like you saw in some of those reasons why, you are giving somebody the chance to live, somebody's mother, somebody's 16-year-old daughter by the name of Lexi Sima. We have to step up. How do we do this? And I'm about done here, but legislation wins. We have forces in the United States that don't think that this is important. And there's a lot of factors that play into that. But we are not taking no for an answer. We will not take no for an answer. I know what's behind that curtain. Many of us know what's behind that curtain. And we are going to continue to fight and pass laws. And as I like to say, we are going to ram it down the naysayers' throats who don't think that it should be done or that it can be done, because we are doing it and we are saving lives on every front. Just because it's not on the news, just because it's not a Damar Hamlin story, doesn't mean anything. 20 kids a day at least die in our country from something that's preventable. We are standing with Damar Hamlin. We have a national law that's going before Congress and the Senate. Why are we doing that law? And again, there may be a little update to this map, but after all of the information I've given you, what you should know that only 22 states in the United States have a law to require the most life-saving piece of machinery on school campus, an AED. 22 states, that means 28 states don't have a law to require the most basic piece of equipment to save lives. And we are trying to change that. And we are in a battle. I can't believe the resistance that we have. Here's the bill summary. It makes $25 million over 5 years available for schools to apply for grants to buy AEDs. CPR AED training, cardiac response, athletic departments implementing heart screenings, and getting a database of heart deaths in our young people. But 25 million over 5 years. So think about that number. It's life-changing money to Shawn and you guys, but that's a drop in the bucket. But this is why I'm bringing it up to you. And this is why I'll volunteer every single time I'm asked to do a talk. It's the first ever talk I did with school health, and Zoll was with you guys. And at that time, we were fighting for a national resolution to AEDs in schools, awareness, if you have them, to train with them. I did that talk, and my old commander from the Air Force was on that call. And she sent this email, and she reached out to many of you who are part of the National Association of School Nurses, school athletic trainers, and look what happened. We passed a law. You may not even know this if you were on that talk. But December 20th, 2018, the National Association of School Nurses, we were thanked by Congressman John Duncan for helping pass this law. And I need you now. I need you now because I have almost 100 bipartisan congressmen and women throughout the United States. And right now I only have 8 Democratic senators in our state, in our country, who are supporting this law. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that, but there's no excuse. It's minimal money. It really doesn't break the bank. This is a door opener for the information that I've just shown you. So if you live in anywhere, actually, I'll just throw this out. If you live anywhere in the United States, you should reach out to your local congressman and your local senator. I don't care if they're Democrat, Independent, Republican, we need you. This affects everybody, and it especially affects you all on this talk because you're on the front lines. When somebody drops on your watch, you're gonna be the one that has to respond. And there damn sure better be an AED, it better be available, and the batteries and the pads better be working because people's lives depend on it. And I'm gonna finish off with this. This is a beautiful summation of my life. My daughter was laying dead on a gym floor. Those 3 individuals responded. Because they responded, I got to see my daughter walk across the stage. I got to see her testify in front of her high school state senate. I got to stand next to her as Ron DeSantis signed the most life-saving piece of legislation in the history of our state, requiring CPR not only to be taught once in high school, but twice. I got to see her start nursing school. I got to see her get married to Evan, who started us off. And now they have a beautiful 1-year-old baby who is the light of my life. And if it wasn't for what happened and picture number 1, none of this happens. That's the power that we have in our 2 hands. Here's some resources for emergency response plans. And I'll go ahead and close it out here. If you have any need or any want to reach out to me, to get involved, to help me, to help everybody, I ask that you please scan that QR code, and I'll finish it off here and just say thank you. I know I probably talked way too long.
No, thank you, Shawn. That's very much appreciated. Thank you also to Evan. Everything in here was extremely impactful and covered just a lot. We appreciate both of you for sharing your experiences with us. We have received some questions during the presentation, so we will now take a few minutes to address these. First question we have is from Denise, and she's asking, what age should these heart screenings be done at? She is a middle school, she's at a middle school with grades 5th through 8. Is this too young? What do you think is the appropriate age these children should start getting screened?
I'll grab that, Evan. We typically start at age 10, and at least every 2 years. If we lived in a perfect utopia like Italy, as Evan described, it'd be every 2 years up to age 22. But typically we started at age 10. And in Florida now, we're starting to do the heart screenings as part of the 6th grade health assessment. In Florida, we bring the kids in, they do a scoliosis check, an eye check, an ear check, and now we've started adding the heart screens to that. And we found several kids, even at age 10, with deadly heart conditions who we've headed off at the past. And as Evan said earlier, have been able to get those fixed and treated and get them back to doing whatever they enjoy doing.
Thank you for the answer. We have another question from Melissa, and she's asking, once diagnosed, are these students able to participate in high school sports with a pacemaker? Is there any restrictions on that once they are diagnosed?
Want me to take it? Actually, the tides are changing. I would say the vast majority of the kids that we find are able to go have ablation procedures and return to sports usually within a week or two. There have been a few that we have found with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or something called ARVD. And it used to be you were probably done with sports, you got a defibrillator, but now the tides are changing a little bit, especially with the most common one, the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. A lot of the kids now are being allowed to return to sports. There's really only one that's like, no, you can't do it. That's the ARVD, because the more you exercise, the worse the heart condition becomes. And they're a lot of times a setup for a heart transplant. But hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, there's a lot of studies. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out in the next few months that actually provides some new guidance and recommendations. So it's not a hard and fast rule anymore that they're done, I should say.
Thank you, Shawn. Appreciate that. Next question is from actually a few people, and they're asking if an AED can still be used if the pads are past the expiration date. Obviously, we know that we want the pads to always be updated. We want the batteries to be new and usable. But if it comes down to it, can you still use an AED with expired pads?
That's a tough question. I will say, I wish Zoll could pipe in and back me up on this, but I know there's been a huge shipping crisis throughout the United States and all the AED manufacturers. So I would say, and Zoll can correct me if I'm wrong, if all you have are expired pads and there's no new ones coming in, they're on back order, then I would say it's better to try it and use them than take it off the shelf. Again, I can't speak from a legalistic standpoint. Zoll, I'm sure, can give more information on that. But I know for me, I would recommend, if this is all you got, the pads are expired, I would take my chances and use it, and God forbid it didn't work, then just keep crushing the chest and doing CPR until help gets there. It's not a great answer, but it's the answer that I would do if I was in that situation. I know it's horrifying, it's horrific. I think about it all the time, that we've had a few of those even in our own town. But you know, the old saying, I guess, is you can't get blood out of stone. If they're not available, then we have to do what we have to do and make the best of the situation. And again, if that's not a good enough answer, I apologize, but that's really all I have. And I'm sure maybe Zoll has some other information.
Yes. Thank you, Shawn. That is a very hard question, and you never know in the moment what can happen. I'm just letting you both know we do have a few minutes left, so let's maybe take one, maybe two more questions until we have to start ending the presentation. Next question is from Anna, asking, is there anything that young athletes can do to minimize the risk of sudden cardiac arrest? Does it always happen unexpectedly? Is there anything they can do to be healthier to try and avoid it? Or is this a genetic, physical thing that won't be known until they do a screening?
The vast majority of them are genetic. Now, you know, things such as like dehydration, some of them even using alcohol, using certain medications can make you more at risk. You know, trying to be as healthy as you can be. And another thing with heart screenings is we're talking a lot about athletes, but there's some conditions that put you at risk for sudden cardiac arrest that have nothing to do with sports. Long QT, if you even take a Z-Pack, or if you dive into a freezing cold pool, it can put you at risk for sudden cardiac arrest. So it's hard to say. You know, definitely trying to be as healthy as possible. You definitely don't want to be pounding energy drinks, you know, that type of thing. If you are prone to, or you have some congenital issue or a hereditary heart problem, you know, a lot of times overdoing it with stimulants can send you over as well. But the vast majority of them, it's usually something that's genetic or that they're born with, and there's not a whole lot they can do to prevent it.
Thank you, Shawn. Appreciate that. I think we're on our final question. We're running shorter on time. A few people are asking this question, and it's, how do you determine the amount of AEDs needed in your facility?
The short answer is, in a perfect utopia, 1.5 minute brisk walk from every point where kids are going to be. You know, if you can get there and back in 3 minutes, that gives you the best opportunity to get the AED on the kid and you know, get the button, you know, pushed, or if it's an automatic, get them shocked. That is where you really get the best opportunity to give somebody the best chance. Again, I know money and I know there's a lot of factors, but in a perfect world, you would have 1.5 minutes there and back. You would have an emergency action plan, just like we saw on the video, where people come flying, everybody knows what they have to do. There's no guesswork. Is this kid having a seizure, or is this kid low blood sugar, or this or that? It's, this kid is down, 911, get the action plan going. Let's get the AED here, put it on the kid. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. We all know, maybe you don't, that an AED is not going to shock anybody that doesn't need a shock. And the beauty of most of the AEDs, they talk you through the rescue from start to finish. So the faster you get that AED there within that 3 minutes, if in a perfect world, that's going to give you the best opportunity. And the way they define that with the AHA is a brisk walk, 1.5 minutes there, 1.5 minutes back.
Thank you, Shawn. Before we close out, it's time to announce the winner of the Zoll AED 3, and congrats to Sherry S. from Nebraska on your brand new AED. We'll be in touch with more details. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you for attending today's webinar. We hope you're able to take a lot out of the presentation and found the information useful. Thank you again to Evan, Shawn, and Who We Play For sharing all this important information with us. After you exit the webinar, you'll see a survey window. We would ask each of you to please take a moment for this brief survey and help us improve what we've done here today. That will end today's broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all very much. Have a great day.